Ndị be anyị ekelekwanụ m unu. Anyị sị ka nke onye chiri ya zelu. Anyị sị ka ọ mara na ala Igbo na mma. Anyị adị ka Chineke ada agwụ agwụ. Otu anyị kwuru ya, otu akwa ya dịrịrị. Ise, ise, ise. Dị ka o si dị ụbọchị uhuruchi nketa anyị wetara nnukwu ozi. Biko geenụ ntị. Ife a bụ according to the Biafran activist wetara ya bụ ozi. Tears of trumpet as USA government approve and recognize Biafran Liberation Army. Hear the news in details. According to the activist wetara ya bụ ozi n'ụbọchị nke taa n'elu akwụkwọ, o kwuru si na United States of America emega approve the Biafran Liberation Army. So dịka anyị ga ya bụ ife ọ ka mma na ị ga-esi anyị gide idropụra ife ichere ụdị nke gị. All right, over to you, sir.
The US President Donald Trump officially recognized the Biafra Liberation Army, a major and unexpected political development. The movement began after a September 25, 2023 attack on southeastern Nigeria by Nigerian forces, prompting Simon Ekpa, the Prime Minister of the United States of Biafra, to seek international intervention. Simon Ekpa wrote to the US Embassy and later formally launched the Biafra Liberation Army during a self-referendum convention in Helsinki, Finland, on October 21, 2023. Joe Biden, the then US President, did not support United States of Biafra, but Simon Ekpa openly endorsed Donald Trump during his 2024 presidential campaign, which was documented on Wikipedia. After Donald Trump's re-election in November 2024, the United States of Biafra gained significant traction in the US government. Mike Johnson, US Speaker of the House, became a strong supporter, personally receiving the United States of Biafra Charter and advocating for it in Congress. The US Congress reviewed and approved the United States of Biafra Charter, which included the creation of the Biafra Liberation Army. By April 2025, 8 countries, including the USA, officially recognized the Biafra Liberation Army, with nations like Israel, France, and Tanzania among them. Meanwhile, Simon Ekpa was granted tentative bail by the Piami District Court in Finland after switching legal representation from Ika Kopra to a new lawyer, Kalumeres. The date for Simon Ekpa's trial in Finland has been rescheduled. This report describes a truly astonishing claim that the United States government, under President Donald Trump, has officially recognized and endorsed the Biafra Liberation Army as a legitimate armed force alongside 8 other nations, and that the Congress even debated and approved a charter creating this army. It tells of Simon Ekpa, described as Prime Minister of the United States of Biafra, writing to the US Embassy, launching a self-referendum in Helsinki, winning Trump's personal support, securing Speaker Mike Johnson's sponsorship in Congress, and eventually persuading the US, France, Israel, Tanzania and others to extend formal recognition. It also chronicles Mr. Ekpa's bail and trial developments in Finland. At first glance, this reads like the script of a geopolitical thriller. But when we unpack each element by examining known US policy, the history of Biafra, the constitutional processes for recognition, and credible contemporary records, we find no evidence that any such recognition ever occurred. Instead, the story appears to be a sophisticated piece of political misinformation. Let us walk through the background, examine each claim in turn, and explain why this narrative cannot be reconciled with established facts about US foreign policy practice, international law, and the real-world status of Biafran separatist movements. The report asserts that after his re-election in November 2024, Donald Trump, making a second non-consecutive return to the White House, led a US government overhaul of Africa policy, formally recognizing the United States of Biafra and its armed wing, the Biafra Liberation Army. In reality, President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., who served uninterrupted from January 2021 through at least April 2025, has not recognized any Biafran entity as a sovereign government or military. President Biden's Africa policy has emphasized strengthening partnerships with Nigeria, one of America's key allies on counter-terrorism, trade, and democratic governance in West Africa. At no point has the U.S. Department of State announced any shift toward recognition of Biafran separatist forces. A search of official State Department press statements and the Federal Register yields no such pronouncement or treaty action. Recognition of a foreign entity by the United States is a grave act, normally announced by the Secretary of State, published in formal communiques, and widely covered by reputable media outlets. No such announcement appears on state.gov, nor in the Congressional Record. Nor do major newspapers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Reuters, the Associated Press, carry any report of U.S. recognition of a Biafra Liberation Army. On the contrary, U.S. policy continues to affirm Nigeria's sovereignty and its territorial integrity, consistent with decades of bipartisan support for a united Nigeria, dating back to the Nigerian Civil War of 1967 to 1970, when Biafra first attempted to secede. Simon Ekpa is indeed a real person, a Finland-based lawyer and political activist of Nigerian origin who styles himself as Prime Minister of a self-declared Government of Biafra in Exile, sometimes calling it the United States of Biafra. Since 2021, he has led protests and symbolic referenda among the Igbo diaspora, demanding independence for southeastern Nigeria under the old Biafran flag. These activities are entirely extra-legal under Nigerian law, and Finland's courts have investigated him on charges related to organizing unlawful gatherings and incitement to violence. In April 2025, a Finnish district court granted him bail pending trial on such charges, an entirely domestic legal matter in Finland, unconnected to any U.S. recognition. There is no record in the U.S. Embassy in Helsinki, nor in the State Department's diplomatic list, of any petition or formal diplomatic démarche by Simon Ekpa. Activists sometimes publicize tweets or self-published videos, but these carry no official weight. A genuine recognition would require presidential or secretarial order, followed by diplomatic notes exchanged between capitals, then publication in the Foreign Affairs Manual or the Congressional Record. None of these steps occurred. The narrative describes Speaker James Michael Johnson receiving a charter for the United States of Biafra, then presenting it to Congress, which debated and approved creation of the Biafra Liberation Army. In fact, the United States Congress has taken no such action. The Congressional Record for 2023-2025 shows no bill, resolution, hearing or debate concerning Biafran statehood or any Biafra Liberation Army. Speaker Mike Johnson has focused on domestic spending bills, U.S. aid to Ukraine and Israel, and immigration reform, never on recognizing secessionist armies in Africa. Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress cannot itself recognize a foreign state. That power belongs to the executive branch. Congress can pass legislation that expresses a sense of the Senate or House on foreign policy, or that allocates funds for certain programs, but only the President, through the State Department, can extend diplomatic recognition. There is no record of any concurrent resolution or appropriations rider dealing with a Biafra Liberation Army. The claim that 8 countries, including France, Israel, Tanzania and Zambia, now recognize the Biafra Liberation Army also lacks any corroboration in the diplomatic sphere. A genuine recognition by France would be announced by the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs, by Israel through the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by Tanzania via its Foreign Ministry communiques, and so on. None of these governments have issued statements or changed their visa, trade or aid policies toward Nigeria or any Biafran entity. On the contrary, Nigeria retains full diplomatic ties with all of them, and its federal government continues to receive military cooperation from Israel and France in counterinsurgency operations in the Lake Chad region and against Boko Haram. The lone precedent for international recognition of Biafra dates to the Nigerian Civil War of 1967-1970, when Gabon, Ivory Coast, Tanzania and Zambia briefly extended diplomatic recognition to the secessionist Republic of Biafra. That was half a century ago, during a brutal civil war in which an estimated 1 to 2 million civilians died from fighting, famine and disease. Those recognitions were withdrawn by 1970 when Biafra collapsed militarily and reintegrated into Nigeria. To recognize a new state or its army today, a foreign government typically issues a formal note verbal, updates its diplomatic accreditation, and often exchanges letters at ambassadorial level. Recognition of an armed force as a belligerent rather than as a state is possible under international humanitarian law, but that is a technical designation made by the International Committee of the Red Cross, not by heads of state. The ICRC's annual reports list recognized non-state armed groups entitled to belligerent status. No Biafra Liberation Army appears on those lists. Even unilateral recognition of belligerency does not create a sovereign government. It merely means that the group is treated under the laws of war, with obligations to respect the Geneva Conventions. The ICRC's database of recognized armed groups in active conflicts worldwide does not include any Biafran entity in 2025. The hallmarks of this narrative: self-published videos on YouTube and Facebook groups, dramatic claims of secret charters, appeals to emotional outrage over Nigerian army actions, invocation of US political personalities, and promises of clickbait revelations match common patterns in online disinformation campaigns. Such campaigns often exploit real grievances, the suffering of civilians in Nigeria's southeast, legitimate calls for greater autonomy, and combine them with false claims of high-level endorsements to mobilize supporters, raise funds, or influence diaspora politics. We find no corroboration in any independent, reputable news outlet or any official government record. The seeds of this story appear in niche social media posts by Biafran separatist activists, amplified by partisan YouTube channels with small followings. There is no smoking gun document from the White House or Congress. No State Department press briefing has even been asked about Biafra recognition. No Foreign Affairs manual entry has changed. No diplomatic cables have leaked to confirm it. Meanwhile, the real Simon Ekpa remains under judicial supervision in Finland. Finnish authorities charged him with organizing illegal demonstrations and incitement. He secured bail, but faces trial. That legal process is public and unconnected to US foreign policy. What really is happening in southeastern Nigeria? Since the end of the Nigerian Civil War in 1970, various groups in the Igbo-dominated southeast have agitated for greater political autonomy, economic development, or outright secession. The main current grouping is the indigenous people of Biafra, led by Nnamdi Kanu, who was extradited from Kenya to Nigeria in 2021 and is now in prison facing treason charges. Simon Ekpa's faction is a splinter group in exile, with limited grassroots support on the ground in Nigeria. Violent incidents do occur in the southeast, sometimes involving clashes between local militias and Nigerian security forces. But these remain localized security challenges addressed by Nigeria's police and military. They have not elicited any international intervention or recognition of a rebel army. The Nigerian government retains full control over major cities like Enugu and Port Harcourt and federal infrastructure. Nigeria continues to receive US security assistance, over $100 million in 2024 alone, for counter-terrorism and peacekeeping in the Lake Chad Basin and the Niger Delta, not for fighting an imaginary Biafran army. Major news organizations deploy reporters in Abuja, Lagos, and the Nigerian southeast. They monitor U.S. diplomatic bulletins, White House press briefings, congressional bills, and the Federal Register. None have reported any shift in U.S.
Ndị be anyị ngwadarụ niile nụ dịka unu si wee gee ya bụ ife anyị ji maka ya wee bịa n'ebe akwụkwọ n'ụbọchị uhuruchi nke taa. Anyị chọrọ ịma ife unu chere n'ụdị nke unu gbasata maka ya bụ ife nwanne nwoke kọwagasị update o wetara anyị n'iru akwụkwọ ka efu nche gbasata maka ya bụ ife dropụrụ anyị ya n'akara comment na comment section ka anyị fụ alụ gị fụ ife iche ngwa ka emesịa na ụmụnne m.